Guys, I've done it. I'm sitting on my land. I'm gonna say it again. I am sitting on my land. I've gone and did it this time. We're back at it again like nothing else. You're looking at a landowner. They always say, until you have a Seejeanty. Seejeanty is a construction site in Creole. You're not really Haitian, right? You know your parents, if you're Haitian diaspora, you know what I'm talking about. You know, everyone has a parent, you know, that has been building on land for 30 plus years. Most of us do anyways. And now I'm part of that elite group of actual Haitians who are doing it. But I tell you though, this process has not been easy. It's been wrought with complications, wrought with delays, wrought with expenses. And even yesterday, there was a conflict where someone said that this was their land, and there had to be an agreement amongst the seller who was selling it to me with this claimant, right? And so literally, when I tell folks, and I've always told folks, one of the most dangerous things you can do in Haiti, you know, risky things you can do in Haiti is get into land before you really understand what Haiti is. And this is true for someone who's grew up out of Haiti and someone who maybe grew in Haiti, but was out for a couple years, and now they got to re-engage with the community which they came from, and especially if you're looking to buy land outside of where you may be familiar with, where your family is. It is wrought with risks. So in this episode, we're going to talk about really everything you would want to know. We're going to break it down, and as long as we have to, we're going to have that conversation today. A lot of folks have been asking for this episode, and I was never ready to provide it until I did it and experienced it myself. And so now that I've done it, let's talk about it. In terms of like bodies that are supposed to be around to regulate land transactions, you're supposed to have the Office of National Cadastre, of course the DGI, and the Minister of Justice are also supposed to be the last stop gates for any, you know, issues related to fraud or transactions. They're supposed to be doing their jobs, so they each should have more than enough resources to handle such an important issue like land and land transactions, but they don't. The reality is that a very small percentage of fraudulent transactions are caught, are prosecuted, and the folks go to jail, right? So these are all risks that we cannot ignore when talking about doing land, buying land in Haiti. And millions of Haitians, I'm gonna say it again, millions of Haitians in Haiti do not have ID, right? Do not have a legal form, driver license or a national ID card, right? And so how exactly do you even register if this person doesn't even legally exist, right? But yet these transactions happen, right? They happen, they continue on, right? And only adds to a parallel market where you have some being registered and transactions happening, and this exists in parallel for the same piece of land, right? You can always go back and say, well, if you understand our history, 1804, you know, slaves won their battle. They weren't necessarily formed in Western ideas of land ownership and land rights, but in some point in 200 years, you would think a government administration would have taken this issue of land rights and land security serious and hit a hard reset button to say, okay, we're just going to start formally registering any transaction that doesn't happen outside of what this formal process that we're creating doesn't count, right? But it hasn't happened, right? For many reasons, because this would piss off a lot of people, right? So the political will certainly hasn't been there, but it has to happen at some point. But this isn't a grand thesis on, you know, the macro. We're here again to talk about the micro component of doing land in Haiti. So let's keep talking about it. Understand the two ways to do transaction here in Haiti. Let's just talk about it. There's the authentic deed process, and then there's just the private transaction. The authentic deed process involves a notary, and the notary does all the legal formalities to ensure that your deed gets appropriately recorded through the stipulations that do exist in the law, and then takes it to the DGI and ensures that the DGI does everything it needs to on its side to record and annex the transaction. On the other side, it's the other type of transaction, just a contractual agreement where two parties give money to each other, and a survey happens, maybe, and maybe they go and record it in the DGI, maybe, right? But the vast majority only stops at that first level, right? Now, there is a hybrid mix, right, where you have private transactions happening first, and then they go to the notary to formalize and do all the processes. Now, that hybrid process is as risky as the pure private, because no one is doing. You are responsible to do all the research as it relates to the appropriateness of the land, the deed, and I can promise you, you will never know. There's stories where folks have grown up on land that they've known that their fathers have owned it and their grandfathers have owned it, and at the time of a purchase or a sale, and they start building on it, or someone else comes in and starts building on it, you'll see 2 or 3 different people come in and say, no, this is actually my land because our great-great-great-grandfather sold it or transacted it to the great-great-grandfather, and now there's a dispute because we have a hereditary disagreement. This is a good time to talk about heredity in Haiti. One of the things that makes doing transactions in Haiti so difficult is the fact that if you have 4 kids and you don't stipulate specifically that this land is going to go to one person, and you don't sign over the paperwork before you pass away to that person, all of your kids have legal authority on that land, right? Not a portion of it, it's not divided by a quarter. They all have legal rights to that land. And so one brother or sibling should not sell land without having every single one of the other family members, other brothers and sisters' signature on there, right? And if one does sell to another and it's a private contract rather than going to notary to do the research, you're going to be in trouble. Now let's go ahead and run that back, just so I know you guys I don't lose you guys. The preferred way to do a land transaction is to, before you give the seller money, you go to a notary, and the seller goes and provides all the paperwork that they have to the notary. The buyer gives the money of the transaction to the notary. After the research is complete, after the research is done on the notary side, the notary then gives the money, or gives the check, right, to the seller from the buyer, right? And then the notary will issue the receipts and provide the actual documentation and takes it to the DGI, the tax office, and totally completes the process. That is the ideal, best way to do it. That protects you the most, but even that, as I'm saying, there's risks involved. For example, you should consider taking it to your notary, right? Because the fact is, as a notary, many notaries have very bad reputations as it relates to the imprudence of land deals, and they would leave it at that. Some have gone even far to be a part of open theft. Now, again, I don't want to make anybody mad here in Haiti. Just know that it's better off to try to go to your notary, and that does even protect you. Because even myself, I tried to go to a first notary, and the vibes I was getting and the things he was asking were a little outrageous relative to the second notary, who was a lot more amiable in his process and a lot more open in their process as well. So that doesn't guarantee it. So that is the ideal way to do it. There's other ways to go about it, right? And that is, again, there's things related as to, they call it versement, right? Which is, in effect, you provide a partial payment, and even that first payment usually is about half of what the sale is. They will allow you to do something called empantage. Empantage is one of the first things you do, actually, after you provide your money. You get a land surveyor to come to your land, and they actually mark and denominate, okay, here's your land, here's where it ends, and of course, and that's all part of what the notary is going to do for you, right? But if it's a private deal, or you're going to go to notary after, then you are responsible for that surveying. You are responsible to make sure someone comes on. And the big thing you have to remember with the surveyor is the fact that they are restricted to specific areas. A notary can be a notary anywhere and record the transaction, do the research from anywhere. Those always prefer to have that notary be from that area, right? But the surveyor is legally bound to within certain bounds, certain areas in the country, and they cannot go out. If you do, that survey is not valid, right? And it will come to bite you later, right? So you always have to be mindful of, does that surveyor that you're using, do they have the rights to be in that area of which they're surveying? That's something you have to keep in mind. It's really important. That said, with all that said, the critical waypoint whenever you do any land transaction is the notary. That's the big thing to remember. However you go about it, and the fact is there isn't a bulletproof process to go about it. However you go about it, the notary is involved, is going to record the deed, and then it goes to the deed job. If you don't do those steps, you leave yourself extremely liable for claims against you, down the road, from an aunt, from a cousin, right? So it's really important. Follow that step, which I just broke down. There are some important terms I do want to make sure you guys understand when you're talking about land in Haiti. Usually, the unit of land that folks will always reference you is a kawo. A kawo is what? It's equal to about 3.1 acres of land, right? The other big unit in Haiti that you'll hear a lot of conversation go around is centime. Centime is equal to roughly 1,400 square feet, right? And of course, I'm using the American systems because that's what we're used to, right? And so it's really important, when you're talking about land, to know those units of measurements. The big thing in the city in particular, prices are going to be priced at the per centime price, right? And that can range from upwards of $3,000 to as high as $10,000, depending on where the land is. This cost, you may be like, whoa, that's really expensive. That's a really expensive cost for land, right? For land, it's a poor country like Haiti. What are you talking about? $10,000 per centime per 1,400 square feet. That, it's when you compare land prices in Haiti versus other Caribbean countries, the first thing that hits you is this is pretty damn expensive for a poor country. But the reality is, one of the things that makes it so expensive is the very thing we just spent a few minutes talking about, how fraught the process is, right? And how risky the process is. And so because there isn't a very clear process in terms of land rights and paperwork, what actually drives the market's price point are the folks with good paperwork. Folks with good paperwork are able to charge a premium, right, for that paperwork. But ironically, the rest of the market piggybacks off that premium price, even though they may not even have even one shred of paperwork, right? It's just strictly, well, I used to live here, I used to be on here, right? But nonetheless, that, after conversations and research, that is really the biggest factor which drive prices. The day that real estate becomes more transparent and it's a lot easier to manage from a document perspective, you're going to see that the prices drop dramatically. And of course, we have to talk about the elephant in the room, financing, right? How, Seejeanty, is YouTube AdSense making you that much money that you're just buying land left and right? Nope. Nope. We ain't there just yet. What allowed me to buy this is financing from America, not Haiti, right? Haiti is so expensive to lend anything. Like anything is, heck, to even buy a car that's fully collateralized, you're looking at probably upwards of 20% or so for a collateralized vehicle. The land goes as high as 30% in Haiti, right? So it can be really expensive to if you even have the capacity to buy it, meaning to even get land, to even get money from a Haitian bank, you have to be working at a Haitian company formally, getting paychecks and everything for upwards of 2 years. So you're not even provide access to a Haitian bank to even do it. So let's just scratch that off. And even if you could, you shouldn't do it because the interest rate's so high, right? I used financing from an American bank, right? American credit institution, actually. And I did a personal loan, right? The personal loan, my credit's exceptional, right? And it cost me about 10%. right? 10% to get, and I just got just enough to make the payment and then and put a bit of a wall around my property. And that's where I'm going to stay for a little bit as I pay down this personal loan down. Because again, 10%, even though it's a lot less than you would have gotten here in Haiti, it's still a lot for my blood, and I want to get that high 10% rate down. And then once that loan's out, then I'll figure out how to find money and build this thing, right? But I know I consult you guys to consider, financing outside of Haiti, because just everything I just mentioned to you, but build your credit. That's one of the things why I always say, before you even try to come to Haiti to do business or live, make sure you are in a good situation in the country you're coming from. Make sure all your debts paid off, your student loans are paid off. Make sure your credit score is solid. Make sure you have a good amount of money saved up before you make that transition. Don't just wake up one day and say, okay, I'm moving to Haiti and I'm going to buy land and do all this. No, make sure you have a plan in place, a process in place, and then leverage. Here's a big thing. Leverage the resources you have in America. And that's really the difference that really gives you power and capacity here in Haiti to do things, because again, you have access to international institutions that Haitians don't have, right? It's just let's speak facts. And I want to leave you with this, guys. Before you do any of the processes I mentioned with the notary and giving money, the fact of buying land in Haiti is this. You're not buying the land. You're buying the word of the seller. And if you're going to buy land, make sure you know who you're dealing with. It has to be someone who multiple people can vouch for. Someone who you know closely, who you trust with your life, can vouch for. If you don't have that level of certainty, go to the area where you're going to buy the land and speak with the community. Speak with anybody you can find and ask them, hey, who is this land who does it belong to, right? Some folks may be a little squeamish, but you'll find 2, 3, 4 folks, if it's really that person's land, to say, oh, I submit so-and-so's land, right? That's so-and-so's property, right? And so it's really important that you can get confirmation from independent sources of who that land is. And folks will tell you too, est-ce que t'es chaud, right? Is this a hot land? Hot being, in conflict, right? Potentially. Folks will tell you, oh, that land over there, oh, there's been multiple people who came on, and there's a lot of discussions as it relates to that land, right? And so it's really important that, you have that fund. And that person who's selling that land, make sure you know where they live, right? Make sure if something gets going as it relates to the land, you can go straight to the house and bang on that door and say, yo, what is going on? I got a group of people here saying it's their land. What's going on, right? And you can resolve that issue, because again, when you enter these situations, you're buying that trust. And again, even buying someone who's not here in Haiti, like there's Haitians who are abroad who say they have land and they want to sell it to you. I'd say be very wary of that. Always give preference to buying land from a Haitian that is actually here in the country, at least especially in the country for the stretch of time during the first few months when potentially you're going to start doing some construction. Because honestly, you won't know a land is a conflict land until you start displacing that first shovel of dirt, and then phone calls start being made. Hey man, there's some people on some land, and then boom, next thing you know, you have 20 people coming saying here's my paperwork, right? And that can happen no matter what. Even if you do everything I told you. Haiti is such a wild, wild west when it comes to land. You will have fraudsters who will still come and make claims and make it so difficult, because they know the process is so onerous and so open with holes. They will just purposely make your life a living hell just so you can give them money to go away, right? And so for all those reasons, you have to take it slow. You have to do it carefully. Follow the steps I gave you. The steps are going to be in my book. I don't want to do a shameless plug right now, but the steps are in my book, right? You buy the book. We talk about it, 101 Ways to Make Money in Haiti, right? And we talk about land rights just like we talked about here, and I provide additional resources, additional guides for you to review and go in detail, not even by me, by the UN, by institutions that are about that. We went ahead and included all those resources that I use to get knowledgeable, so you'll have that knowledge to make sure you're doing everything right and you're supposed to. Because again, land is such a tenuous thing in this country. You want to be very careful. But I tell you, guys, the journey was worth it. I can tell you the fact that I'm talking to you on my land, it feels great. And I can really feel that, I'm really a Haitian now. Now that I have a piece of Dessalines' efforts, a piece of Toussaint's efforts that belongs to me, and God willing will always belong to me, my kids, my family, for generations to come. Guys, if you like what we've got going on here, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, share this video. This video is going to help someone right now. I know it. It's going to help a lot of folks understand the land process. If you didn't know, now you do. We show you the different side of Haiti. We give you practical guides to be successful in terms of business and land, and just have fun and have a good time. So if you like what we got going on, if you appreciate this episode, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and share this video, because Haiti will only change when we see it different, when we think about it different, so we can engage with it different, and it will be different. All right? Until we're back at it again, guys. We'll be back at it again. Peace.